started my first company when I was a freshman. Actually, I started an SAT business. It was actually a tutoring business.
Yeah.
And the first person I tutored went up 400 points, and I take full credit for that.
I wish I had known you when my kids were studying for the SATs.
But what happened was then I started tutoring the whole neighborhood, and then eventually started a business with one of the fathers of the students. And so I was running an SAT business.
Right.
We had an office. Freshman? Yeah, freshman. So my first day, when we first opened, I was wearing a tie, white shirt. I was 18. The students were 17, and there were 3 of them.
Yeah.
And that's how things start. And it was in a nice office building. You get the idea. I think what you'll find with most hot-blooded entrepreneurs is that their parents told them a lot of things and they did none of them.
They didn't listen.
So if I ended up in engineering school, just like my dad, it wasn't because he told me, because he knew if he told me anything, I would do the opposite. So it wasn't really about that. I mean, of course, I respect my dad and I respect the engineering mentality. It was just so much of how I defined myself as a kid. But I think what they actually said is kind of interesting because you hear about parents that really push their kids, straight A's, perfect SAT score, like all of this. Actually, they just sort of said, do your best. Do your best at whatever you do and you're good. And they also said, you can be whatever you want. And it was like one of those things where it's like you're 6 years old and you're in a car and your mom is driving you home from school and she tells you this. She's crying. That's going to make me cry. You can't do that, Mom.
Well, I know that feeling. I get like that.
So if your mom tells you this every day when she's taking you home from school, then that's what you believe. And so even when, look, I like to win, I'm a competitive guy, but when I lose, I don't feel bad as long as I put everything I had to win. And so, and also I don't sort of assume that there's a box and I have to be in it. I just I say what's outside of the box. Like I can just be whatever I want to be. And that really came from my mom. I'm not a big believer in the sort of aphorisms, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, the advice is, maybe it's some of the things I've already said, like if you know yourself, then you can start to build a vision for what you want to become and what you want to do with your life. So that's probably the most important. But if you're in the entrepreneurial mode already, I guess what I'd really say is instead of advice, I find, because the problem I have with advice is that I used to seek out advice all the time. And what would happen is I'd go talk to all 20 people when I had a hard decision. And then I started to be able to predict what they were going to tell me. Mm. And it was always based on their own experience, of course, and you could predict it, but then even if I could predict what they were going to say, that didn't help me solve the hard decision that I had to make. And so I'm not a believer in advice because of that. What I actually love is stories. Instead of asking somebody to tell me what to do, what I prefer is tell me a story. And I can then listen and hear the parts that are interesting about what they're saying and that do apply to what decision I've got to make. And then I have to do the hard thing of actually making the hard decision. Because, by the way, the easy decisions, you don't need advice on.
Right.
It's only the hard ones, but then the hard ones are so hardcore, so hard, so difficult, nobody can actually tell you what to do because you're still stuck with, is it the right thing? Mm-hmm. And so I find the stories are the best way to get there. And people who are good storytellers and who have great stories to tell because they've lived a full life are the people you should seek out when you have a hard decision.